and we'll get introductions real quick for myself and the speakers. But before we do, just want to say welcome into this space. We often don't have the opportunity to have spaces like this that really celebrate intersectional identities. And as a reminder, in this space, your whole self is welcome, all parts of you. And as a part of it, feel free to ask, drop any questions that you may have, and don't feel shy. Or if you have any questions that you may feel that you don't want to write out loud, feel free to direct message them to myself. And I'm happy to interject those questions as well into our conversation. Also, bullying or intolerance of any kind is not tolerated. And so if anyone is facing any of that, please definitely message either myself or Kenny, running logistics from our organization side. And we're happy to take care of that to help create the safe space for us this evening. Awesome. And so let's get into our talk. One sec. My operations are a little clunky today. Thank you for your patience. I'm so excited to announce our speakers for this evening, Rachel, Tolu, and myself. I will be doing the moderation. But before we get started, Rachel, Tolu, do you want to do a quick introduction for yourself, for everyone as well? Rachel, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So excited to be here with all of you today. As you know, my name is Rachel. I currently am in San Francisco in the Inner Richmond district. Let's see. And then in terms of what I'm currently doing today, I currently work as a consultant for Sephora, helping lead the UX and product team against a bunch of different initiatives. Prior to that, I've had experience working at an agency and also at various retail companies before that. And then in terms of what I'm celebrating today, I'm celebrating all of you. Again, I'm super honored and excited to be here and share this space with all of you and get to know you all better.
Thank you, Rachel. And Tolu, you want to do a quick intro?
Hi, everybody. I'm Tolu Garcia. So nice to meet all of you. Super excited to be here today as well. So I'm located in Texas. At the moment, I'm in Boston for a client trip. But as far as what I do in my day job, I'm a product designer at NotDev, which is a small design agency, remotely based, but most of us are in Texas. And I also do a lot of freelancing with other companies. But before that, I've worked with B2B, B2C, then the whole corporate spiel and all that stuff. I've been a designer for over 8 years. But as far as like what I'm celebrating, just celebrating this conversation, I think it's a really important one in order for you to decide how you want to grow and be able to plan your growth trajectory in your career.
My name is Stephen Wakabayashi, and I'll be moderating the conversation, founder of this nonprofit organization, and located here in New York City, unceded Lenape territory, and have been in this industry for quite some time, working on many clients across tech, across finance, across all different domains. I originally started off as a developer and shifted into design, UX, and right now leading a bunch of creative teams across different agencies, working on some really, really fascinating projects. And yeah, really excited to create space and hold space with you all today. And really, let me close out of this and we'll enter the space for our discussion. You should see all of us kind of highlighted in the little boxes. We sat down together, Rachel, Tolu, and myself, and we're just asking ourselves, okay, well, based on this topic, leveling up, how to get people really great tactical, tangible advice to really up-level their career, and what are some things that we've seen across the industry or just our tenure with our career on just some tips to take into consideration as you grow, especially within your UX journey. And so I think today, what we'll do is touch on a bunch of topics that came up. Feel free to leverage the chat as you may to drop in any additional questions. But the first topic that came up was really around articulating design decisions. And especially in terms of working within the space of UX, right? That touches on design, that touches technologists, that touches so many different things. That was something that was definitely coming up as a part of some things that we were noticing. And so first, I want to turn it over to Tolu. And my question to you is, what are some challenges that you've seen, especially with ways of working as it goes into maybe articulating design decisions or in terms of working with other folks within this industry? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the challenges with articulating that is understanding what you need in order to do that. So each person is a little bit different as far as maybe they need a little bit more communication, maybe they take notes differently. Something I always say to the junior designer in a team is come to every meeting prepared to ask questions, even if you don't have any questions to ask, or at least be there attentively listening. Because if you're able to intake information well and being able to explain what you learned from each meeting, because there's always going to be like meetings that are like pointless, but if you can explain why it was pointless, I think that's important too. When it comes to like additional challenges, understanding where your confidence, like if you're having issues with like confidence when it comes to presenting your work, knowing what type of questions you need to ask in meetings in order to feel more confident. And I think it sometimes ties into like you may need to prepare, like it may seem like you're doing the most when you're preparing for meetings, but if you're not able to clearly explain like, okay, maybe this text field, input field, right? Like the color you chose or the size of it. If you can explain like every single detail in it, then you need to take more time evaluating like your design decisions in that, because those are the types of questions you'll get like randomly. And I mean, it put you on the spot, and it's okay to say like, I don't know, but knowing that after the meeting, like you'll be able to like do the work of figuring out, okay, why don't I understand this? And like, what type of questions do I need to ask to understand this?
Yeah. And maybe going a little bit further, question for you, Rachel, is what have you seen, especially with working with designers, especially up and coming designers, right? As it pertains to maybe articulating design decisions, like Tolu mentioned, and just what are some hurdles that you see that you could give some advice in this regard?
Yeah, so some things that I've noticed and that I've also done myself is, for example, if I'm designing something, sometimes I'll have something and it looks really cool, and sort of kind of building on what Tolu was saying, just making sure that there is a reason for everything that you do and that it's intentional, because it can come up in meetings. And then also too, when you are presenting to an audience as well, also being aware of like where they're coming from, like what type of stakeholder they are, for example. So certain stakeholders have different priorities. So being able to cater your decisions, so to speak, in a way that speaks to like what their needs are, what they're looking for when it comes to.
Yeah, and one thing that's coming up for me that you just reminded me, Rachel, of just like knowing where you're coming from. I think what I would love to is, I totally forgot to mention this, but maybe, Tolu like would love to understand like how you even got started, right? Like how you even got started to what you're doing today, and just like what got you into the industry, what got you started, also some of the like amazing stuff you're doing that kind of brought us together. Yeah.
Yeah, so my way of getting into UX isn't completely traditional. So I started off as a graphic designer. That's why I got my my degree in was graphic design. And I didn't hear about UX until a coworker had told me about UX. And the funny thing was I was already doing web design. So imagine that, and doing web design, I have no idea what UX is. But because I was asking why a lot in meetings, that's why one of the coworkers, he's like, I think UX is what you're looking for. It's like it's still tied in to doing UI every day, but you're also getting to talk to the people that use what you're creating, you know? And I was like, that's exactly what I'm looking for. So once I figured that out, then I became really passionate about that, started to learn more education about UX, getting a lot of that foundational 101 education, and then branched off into becoming like a freelancer, into where now I work at an agency, and that's what I do most of the time.
And I mean, follow up to that, Tolu, is you do a lot of work also working with BIPOC communities, especially Black communities within the realm of UX. And just wanted to ask, like maybe what inspired you to get started in some of that work? And yeah, what are some interesting things coming out of that as insights, especially in doing that work?
Yeah, so the podcast I have, UI Narrative, it started out as just a hobby for me to get more comfortable with speaking. Because something I know, yeah, I probably can't tell as of now, but I had a lot of issues with speaking publicly. Like I would freeze a lot. I would kind of like not be able to find words to say. But the podcast was the way. I was like, oh, well, maybe I could start a podcast and it'll make me feel more confident, It's like I know how to articulate my decisions. I know how to explain what I'm doing, but I would find that I would have a lot of imposter syndrome when it came to meetings and feeling like I didn't have anything to say. So it was a way for me to, want to speak up. But then it turned into something else because like when I started sharing my story, like I would get people cry like, oh my gosh, like I experienced the exact same thing. And I was like, there's got to be more than like, me being the only Black person in the room. I'm like, there got to be more of us out here. So that was like the whole reason, like when I started to expand on the podcast, is finding more people that look like me doing what I do to show other people out there, like you're not alone. There's community for you. You just have to, look for it. And it's not that hard to find if you just Google search it now, which is amazing.
Yes, most certainly. And Rachel, maybe for question for you is what did what was your coming of age into the realm of UX, and how have you made the transition from your background as well into doing more UX as a full-time career?
Yeah, so I've always been into design and have always considered myself a creative person. I've always loved drawing and doing all sorts of stuff like that when I was a kid. I actually originally got into computer science thinking that it was going to be more creative than it is, and didn't feel like programming calculators all the time. That didn't fulfill my creativity need. So I got into more digital design, and my degree is in new media, which encompassed a bunch of different design disciplines. So it was a little bit of graphic design, a little bit of web design, audio and video. And my initial jobs were, I would say, a little bit of graphic design and then some web design. And often in my earlier career points, I would be given an assignment, a project, and be told to do, let's say, a feature, a website. And I was always curious into the, well, why are we doing this? It was just always handed to me, and I always had questions on like the why and wanted to dig deeper. And that's when I figured out that UX is sort of my path, because that's where I was really allowed to dig deeper, get answers to my questions, figure out those answers myself, do research, which I realized is something that I love, that I didn't know that I loved, just because from previous school and doing research papers, that's not something that I wanted to do. But in this realm, it's definitely something that I get excited about. So just that curiosity is something that really got me into UX.
It looks like there's also a comment about folks relating to computer science not being creative stimulating enough. And yeah, and also follow-up question to you is now, you are managing folks in such a large organization, solving big problems that touch a lot of people. Like I'm sure many of us have walked into a Sephora or have used Sephora applications, website. I know I definitely purchased a bunch of stuff. And I mean, question for you are like, what are some of the challenges that's coming up for you in doing that as well? And I know your team is rapidly growing too.
Yeah, I would say some of the challenges are, I think one of the things that I've realized is seeing just how connected a lot of these separate projects are. It's so easy to keep them compartmentalized and separate them out. But when you really zoom out, they're all super connected. And I think it's really thinking about the experiences, not just the app, not just the website, but zooming out and just thinking about like all of the touch points, from whether you're in store, at home, when you open your lipstick package, whatever it is you get, that's all part of the Sephora experience and just thinking about that holistically and just making sure that for me, that as I'm working across all these different projects and initiatives, that making sure it's a seamless experience, not just for our clients, but also for our BAs who are the employees of Sephora as well.
Let's talk about that, clients and just like working with folks and articulating stuff. And I mean, this goes back into our initial conversation, but I think for us, right, Tolu, Rachel, one thing that we shared as a common bonding point was just the difficulties of sometimes working with business leaders and other folks, especially within our domain and outside of our domain, you know, and maybe the question for both of you is, what are some tips of success that you might be able to give to some folks working with people who might be a bit difficult, might be a bit strong-willed in terms of what they want to articulate or do, that maybe not consider the user or not consider user experience with a creative department?
Yeah, I have a perfect example because I just finished up a project with Toyota, and there was a very huge, significant feature that they were considering cutting from the product. And all of this was because they didn't comprehend why the feature should be there, but it's because they didn't talk to Toyota dealers. So I kept pressing with them, like, we need to talk to people. This is a hint, like a hunch that I have that this probably would be a feature that they would really love. Let's talk to them, prove me wrong. And that was over a period of like 3 months, just to give you guys perspective of how long some of those conversations can happen as far as getting stakeholders to agree with you on pushing for research. Because sometimes you'll have to do the UI first and then the research would follow up. But being able to continue the conversation with them and including them in that process. Because I know a lot of times they might be like, oh, here, go do the research, and then just bring us results. But I think it's really helpful to pull them into the room with you, because with a lot of features that you want to add to a product, sometimes they may not comprehend why they are important until they see that person struggling. Then they are able to see the value of it.
Yeah. What about you, Rachel? Any examples that come to mind, especially in bringing stakeholders along for the adventure? Maybe challenges that you face with that, and maybe what has worked for you?
Yeah, so I have a few. Like, one of the things I've come across is stakeholders where there might be a knowledge gap. So maybe they're not as educated or have as much exposure to UX and design, and like just being willing to be open to communicate best practices, methodologies, and using that as an opportunity to have them on your side. So for future projects, for example. And then also just being open to, again, just understanding where they come from and building that business acumen, that business etiquette, and learning how to speak to other partners outside of design. And then on the flip side, I guess I've also encountered, let's say, other partners where maybe they can give feedback that might be harsh, for example. I think something that's been big for me too is just learning to separate that and not take it personally, and then also being able to distill what they're actually trying to communicate, because again, for whatever reason, maybe there's a knowledge gap, maybe they're just feeling maybe a little reactive, just being able to pull out what they're saying underneath that and then help guide them so that you can get helpful and constructive feedback to move forward.
I want to piggyback off of something Rachel just said, because it is so important, like being able to extract the important next steps for you from a meeting is something that like you must be able to understand if you want to level up, because that's basically what like leads do. That's what principal, designers do. They're thrown into like this chaos, right? And they're expected to pull from that what their next tasks are, what's their purpose going to be on this project, right? And that can be very complicated at times, but I think it's just important, regardless of like, okay, you're going onto a meeting, maybe you've never met these people, start writing down the people's names on the meeting, and maybe you're going to be separately emailing them, figuring out what their role is in the company. So that way you better understand who to ask the right questions. And also too, you might be on a meeting that like it spirals out of control and the conversation is so derailed from what the original like meeting is about. So I think just coming to every meeting, like, okay, what are my like top questions I need to ask in this meeting? And sometimes it means you have to interrupt someone. You're not being like an a-hole about it, like, but I mean, you're just doing your job. So just coming to the meeting expecting that I'm going to get from this meeting what I need, even if it means like, you know, have to put things to a stop and say like, hey, I need these questions answered.
Oh, that's a great tangible advice. I think writing down people's names, and what helps me is sometimes doing a little bit of homework of who's who, you know, and sometimes that adds the context into how deep we can go into the conversation, into a particular domain or particular specific, you know, technical requirement, for example. And especially as we start off in the industry, I think it's really easy to assume everyone knows everything, but it's actually a double-edged sword where even though people may not know everything, when we understand where we can go deeper with some folks, it can help to unlock some of the secret intel, as one might say, that can help accelerate some of our work to be successful, right? And I'm wondering if there's any other, I love what you said, Tolu, just like this extrapolating the next action. But question for both of you is, I mean, it's a very hard challenge, but any other tips that help you to distill what to take action on or where to go further, especially with your team's UX work or creative work?
I usually like to start understanding, well, because I'm viewing it from the agency side right now, because that's what I do a lot. So understanding like, okay, am I the only designer on this project? Is there a researcher on this project? So that way I know if I'm carrying both loads, because that changes the whole scope as far as like, okay, how much time can I actually like dedicate to this compared to like if I'm just designer solely, you know, then a researcher can do most of those researcher tasks. Being able to talk to the developer, I think is so crucial, because you could be designing something that APIs can't even pull the data for to display, you know, and you have to get into those technical questions. Even if a lot of that stuff goes over your head, I think it's really, really important to just make sure you understand. So asking questions, even to the point where it may feel annoying, it's so important. And I still do this today. Like I feel annoyed, like when I ask a bunch of questions, because it's like I'm hijacking the meeting. But I mean, the higher up you go, you're basically facilitating each meeting you go to, because as the product designer, in a lot of cases, unless you have a really, really good project manager, you're the one like running that project for the most part. Yes, you might have someone else that's like dictating, like scheduling the meetings and stuff. But as far as like when it comes to the product being built, they're going to turn to you and be like, okay, where are we? You know, of course, you know, development can go and create whatever they are, but they're looking to you for how it's going to look. So I think it's really important to just prepare to facilitate every meeting you go to.
Something else that comes up for me with that is, I was just thinking of a recent example of also being ready to facilitate having other stakeholders that may not communicate outside of your design review, whatever meeting that is, and being able to help guide them and aligning them, making sure that they're talking, because sometimes we think they're talking in the backgrounds and getting priorities straight, requirements met, and sometimes that happens and it's great, and sometimes it doesn't. And just being ready to sort of ask those questions live and get stakeholders to align and agree and move forward.
Yes. And also in regards to that too, I mean, resonate 100%. Sometimes you feel like you're playing therapist, right? Where it's like, let me just, you know, how do I make space for you? Just like, so it's like UX designer, half therapist, half, you know, consultant, half babysitter. And I think when we can put on these different lenses, I mean, the way I see it is you have to have this innate sense of curiosity, right, for people in general. And that's really a part, and the beautiful part of the whole domain of user experience is having an innate sense of curiosity, not just for the user, right, but also the people, the business people, the designers, the developers, everyone that's a part of the mix. And sometimes why it feels like you're the babysitter, therapist, or whatever you may say is because these are ways in which you're able to unlock people opening up, people sharing things, or really allowing them to collaborate in whichever way that they most feel comfortable with us in the process. Aria says, love everything being said, already experienced so much of this being an agency myself for about a year now, and this is so helpful. Yeah. What else is coming up for you, Tolu, Rachel? If somebody came to you and was like, you give me your secret to success. Secret to success being within agency that both of you have experience in, or being product side. Secret to success. What might be another one of those attributes?
My biggest one is I just come prepared to every meeting. Like I tell people this, and like specifically the junior designer I'm working with right now, and she's like, but what if I don't understand, like how am I going to come prepared for a meeting? Like I didn't schedule the meeting. You can still like look, you can email the person, be like, hey, like, you know, of course, if you're junior, you might ask the lead on the project, like, hey, what's this meeting about? I think it helps you be able to sort through your thoughts a little faster, because I know, especially when you're being onboarded to a new project, blank canvas, right? It can be really overwhelming trying to intake everything and be like, okay, where do I start? But it really helps you be able to like organize things if you at least have a one-liner paragraph or something of like, okay, this is what this meeting's about. This is like the keywords I can look for to try to understand like how I'm going to help out with this project. Because I think that's just one thing you really have to be able to prove to managers, like if you're trying to like level up.
Yeah, and building on that, that actually reminds me of also helping others be prepared for a meeting. I think something that I've also found is having an agenda before also helps other participants in the meeting be ready to come back with feedback or just do some homework, maybe, for example. And I found that also very helpful. And then at the same time too, like there's times where I've also been ready for a meeting and maybe things don't go exactly as planned, or maybe I don't have the answers that I want. So also being flexible and open to ambiguity, which happens a lot, and not being, I guess, thrown off by it, but using that as an opportunity to just get more information, jot down any open questions, any blockers. Yeah, just being flexible.
I want to jump on ambiguity that she said, because that's another thing I see a lot of people trying to level up struggling with, because I know it's overwhelming. You're thrown into something, it pivots into another way, and you're like, okay, well, how do I add value here now? Like, I don't understand. Like, this is a completely different product than what we started with, you know? But being able to still be able to go back to the drawing board to see, okay, maybe now they're not looking to like do a complete redesign. Maybe it's more of like, okay, let's just do a UX audit to see if we can change like the copy to help improve like conversions or something. Maybe you like scope it down, but figuring out the little key areas of like how UX can still be incorporated, even if it's not originally how it started. I think that's so important, be able to understand how you pivot for different projects.
Absolutely. And then Aria writes in the chat, the motto of stay ready so you don't have to get ready. I think it's really, really essential. And then for myself, even logistically, something that I found that helps tremendously is spending a little bit of time on Sunday just to plan out the week and having an idea of, if this week, this is a prompt I always give myself and my teams is, if this week went according to plan, what should we look to achieve by Friday, right? And having those milestones set up so that as you're working through the week and things come up and, you know, all these things, I mean, rarely do we have a week actually go as planned, right? So many things come up, but at least having these milestones in place so that one, you can understand, you know, as you're going towards your milestone, if you have to pivot, if you have to shift maybe the question, the stimuli, if you have to take in other different methodologies or connect with other people to fill the gaps for you to hit those milestones as well. And so I found that to be really helpful, of just like Sunday, sitting down, spending 10, 15 minutes per different work stream, of just asking myself, you know, by Friday, what do I hope to achieve, right? And what might be the little milestones that folks may need to hit across all the different team members. And it sounds like some people here may be going into managing some folks as well, and would love, you know, some advice from both you, Rachel, and Tolu, of just, especially now, putting on the lens of now you're responsible not just for your work, but you're responsible for people under you, right? What maybe advice might you have of just how to find success, or what have you found to be successful for you in helping to manage other folks?
Something that comes up for me in managing others is just creating that safe space for questions. I think for me, I've been afraid to ask questions because I don't want it to seem like maybe I don't know the answer, or maybe I don't want people to think, oh, maybe they're not qualified, for example. And I get that imposter syndrome. And so just one, being open to ask questions, and two, as a manager, just being able to, again, just create that psychological safety that there's no stupid questions, there's no right answers. And in fact, I actually love it when people ask me questions, because I can tell that they want to learn, they're engaged, versus not hearing anything and being like, hope everything's okay, and checking up on them and stuff like that. So yeah, I would say questioning is something that I highly encourage.
100% agree with Rachel. Like, you have to leave the space for whoever you're managing to ask you questions. And the way I like to do it, I have like these check-ins like twice a week with the person I work with, and they're just standing, they're optional. We could always schedule them, we can make them longer. It just depends on like what they need help with. And also too, as they're going through the project, them being able to vocalize, okay, if they're stuck on something, I want you to explain to me what you're stuck on, because then that helps them to be able to get better at articulating like what their weaknesses are. And I think too, just like for you as a designer yourself, regardless of like what level you are, it's important to know areas you struggle more on. Like maybe you're not good with content writing, maybe you're not as good with research. Seeing how you can utilize other people on the team, lean on them a little bit if you're working on a team. If not, understanding like, okay, I know I'm not as good with this, but figuring out maybe you need an extra tool or something that you can use, or you need to spend a little bit more time with inspiration if UI is something that you're struggling with. But leaving that space for that conversation to happen, because something that me and her will go through is like, okay, you're struggling on something, okay, let's workshop it together. This is how I would think about it, pointing out line by line. I'd go to the land book for inspiration, or I'd go and look at a designsystemsrepo.com to see a type of portal that we're designing, finding realistic examples like functional UI that matches what you're creating, I think always like sparks that creativity. So just being able to provide the right type of resources for them wherever they are, whatever they're struggling with. And sometimes it's just like, if she's struggling with like next phase of project, I won't always point it out to her. I'll give her like a resource online of like, okay, this is how you write a case study. Think about like how this person laid out a case study. What's something that you could potentially do next based off of this case study? What's a potential research method that you could use that you haven't thought of yet? So it's just laying that foundation of like, okay, I'm gonna nudge you in the right direction, but you can't always like point them or do the work for them, because then it won't stick to them like a muscle memory. Like they have to get it wrong, and then they'll learn from that.
Yes, it's so, we can't ever do the learning for everyone, right? And it's one of those things that everyone has the opportunity to learn as well. And I think, this is advice I see sometimes in management, is sometimes managers get so frustrated, right? They're like, oh, like, I don't have time to teach it, or I'll just do this, right? And in one of those instances, how, I reflect on those opportunities is maybe the management has not been as proactive, to think about those learning pathways. And so one big thing, especially in managing other designers and creating pathways, is being proactive in giving those lessons ahead of time, or figuring out what are some of those gaps to begin with. Like you mentioned, Tolu, is you can't give people the answer and expect them to also come up with the answer again that you just gave to them. You're like, what's 1 + 1 is 1 + 1 is 2. Okay. Like tomorrow, it's like, do you tell me like what do you talk about? But I'm not going to help you. And they're like, I don't know. Yeah. And also going back to real world examples that you had mentioned, I think oftentimes for designers, and this is what I've observed too, is sometimes when we start, we want to innovate, and make everything its own custom curated experience, and everything is its own beautiful, a little project and everything. But sometimes there are, things that we can really lean into that has been tried and true over so many iterations across many different industries, and also thinking about at the end, what is easy for the user, right? What's a design paradigm, or web, mobile, or what are some of the attributes, right, that we can lean harder into so that we can actually then leverage that to create a more beautiful experience, right? Rather than recreating the wheel from scratch. And maybe I want to ask you both, is there anything that you'd like to add to that in terms of advice or things that you see certain designers get stuck on, especially as they're, starting off in design, or challenges that may like come up that you might have additional advice for?
I think for me, something that I've
Yeah.
seen is other designers wanting to get, I guess, perfect right away, and just being okay with, I don't know, that ideation phase, that exploration phase, being a little bit messy, doing some trial and error, not just being so married to landing this perfect experience and then having that all polished up. I think that's something that I've seen, and then even myself have gone through, of like, oh, I get married to this one great idea and I sort of put all of my energy into that, and just being able to just have a little fun, experiment, be a little messy, and explore, and even think of multiple ideas rather than just the one idea. And I think that really helps you just explore like other opportunities that may even go beyond what you thought was this big innovative concept, for example.
Yeah, I've seen designers have like a tunnel vision type of issue. Like, so they'll be given like, whatever the objective is for the project, and then they'll start designing, and it's like they have one great idea and they're like, oh yes, like this is the idea, like I don't need to do anything else. But realistically, when you're working with a client, especially if you're in the very beginning of the project, you're going to need like 3 to 4 iterations of that idea, because they might hate that idea, right? So being able to pull from a collective of good ideas, and just to like dive into that, like how do you get a collective of good ideas, looking on real products, like I said before, because you never want to really start, especially like if you're in the beginning phase, for anyone that's listening, or if you're managing someone or wanting to do that, you don't want them starting from complete scratch when it comes to how they imagine UI patterns to be. Just so y'all know, most UI patterns already exist and are already functional. A lot of that stuff you don't have to create from scratch, because it's just been tried and tested for years, several years, like decades for some of this UI patterns. So as you're pulling in your collective for what you want to put in your design, pulling from stuff that already exists. Maybe you're looking on an app on your phone, you're doing some competitive analysis, right? You're like, hey, I like how they do this input field, right? Pulling that in, it's like, okay, how can I do this in 3 different ways, right? You have that base of like, okay, this is a functional UI pattern. Now let me try to break from that, or break away from that, to see like how I can iterate on this.
Love that. Love that. It seems like there is also questions that some folks would like to ask. Opening up the space now, feel free to unmute to ask some questions to our speakers.
Love everything that I've been hearing. I think the teams that you guys work on are probably very lucky to have you guys. What I'm getting is kind of back to the meetings, and a little bit what we were talking about before, and kind of like having a bigger picture view. What I kind of understood is it's kind of like you're doing. I'm also not fully in this field, so you're kind of like doing the work, and then also like kind of keeping like meta tabs, like of who people are, of like what meetings are about, and this kind of thing. So my question is, how, like, this is a very like concrete question. What tools do you use to keep track of this? Like, do you write? Do you like take notes? What kind of notes? Like, what are the like concrete things that you're like, okay, I made the meetings or I made the notes on this meeting. Where am I putting that? Where am I like, where's that living? Where is that so that I can like have it to use?
That's a great question. And thank you for asking that. For me, when I'm in meetings, for example, like pen to paper works very well for me in terms of memory retention. So often I'll write down notes as I can. Of course, it depends if I'm like presenting and up and facilitating. Sometimes in that sense, I may have to rely on my memory, or if I'm at a computer, I will also take notes. But whatever notes I take and then go back to. Like often I like to have it, for example, either open, it could be an application, Evernote, text edit, whatever it may be. Sometimes I'll actually post it in my design files just as this reminder to just to have and keep track of. And then I also use that as a way for me to just make sure that I'm addressing any of the business needs, question needs, and just to have them ready for when I am in that next meeting.
I use Apple Notes for most of my stuff just because I can, open it from my phone and it's also on the computer. As far as like how my process looks like, I'm taking a lot of screenshots and I drag them into Apple Notes because for me, when I see an image, that's when it really like, I'll stick into my memory. Yeah, it's as simple as that. And then for some clients, they prefer like the notes be tracked in like different software like Notion. So I'll just copy that stuff and put it with the date and like the attendees of that meeting, because that's really helpful to know who's heard what information, because not everyone shows up all the time. So yeah.
And something that's sort of helped me too in our hybrid virtual world is often, for example, when we're in a Zoom meeting and some people have their photos, some people don't, I'll sometimes take the extra step if they don't have, let's say, a photo as part of their Zoom profile, and I'll look them up on LinkedIn and sort of attach somebody, and that actually helps me personally. I'm a very visual person. That actually helps me also remember people. And if I am in that next meeting and they just have their name, like I don't know, having that memory of their face when they speak also just helps me, I don't know, just create that association. So I think that's something that's helped with the personable aspect too of being in those types of meetings.
Absolutely. And then Chris had shared a tool, Otter AI, which automatically transcribes as a part of meetings. I've used it before. It's quite fascinating tool. You just add it and it just adds itself to meetings like a ghost person, and then it transcribes it. It also has some really, really cool features too. And it's also free up to a certain tier. And sometimes it could do like a word cloud or a bunch of gathering. Sometimes I'm like, oh, it's like a little too intense of hyper analyzing everything. And also, what else? And then a living doc that members take turns maintaining it. And I think that's the beauty of Google Docs or Notion that everyone can collaborate into. One tip that has helped me tremendously, at least, is think about ways that you can also distribute your work, right? Sometimes we, as perfectionist mindset, we want to put ourselves in the center of it. We're like, I'm going to be the one on the hook to deliver everything. But oftentimes we only have 24 hours in the day, 8 hours for sleeping, 8 hours for, working, hopefully, and not like crazy more than that. Otherwise, you don't have any more time to do anything else in your life. And so, especially as a part of that, see the simple opportunities such as a distributed way to take notes, or having different people take on different roles to help gather that, so that we can really, where I found success, at least for myself, is see where you fit the best kind of role within that team, right? And what gaps you fill, especially with trying to get everyone to point A to point B. And I think once you can find that secret sauce or that special thing that you add to the team, that's really going to be where you're going to find a lot of wins, Yeah. And thank you for coming, Anna and Crystal. Yes, also love Otter AI. Aria also love Notion, pen and paper, Notion for all stuff at work, but actionable steps like pen and paper for memory retention, like Rachel said. And I think there's been like some science, right? Where actually, like, as you write, you actually retain way more of it than, you typing it, because it's like the muscle is just like your finger twitching. There wasn't actually stuff written. I mean, random question, but do you still, Tolu, Rachel, as part of like wireframing or just sketching, are you finding yourself doing most of it all within like Figma, or do you still do any of it with like pen, paper, stuff like that?
For stuff that has really complex information architecture, I still like to sketch it out, just because it's easier for me to just like dissect and quickly restart it over. Like it's easy to in Figma, but there's just something about like being able to do something, go to the next page, do it again, or on my whiteboard too. Sometimes I do that. So yeah,
I always have pen and paper near me. I have like a stack of paper near me all the time. I love just, starting out sketching. And I feel like when I start on computer, that's when I actually get stuck. And often it's because maybe I'll get distracted by a Slack message, or I'll notice that my boxes aren't perfect. And at that point, it really doesn't matter. And it actually blocks me from just coming up with ideas, organizing, whatever it may be. So just having pen to paper, keeping my focus there, just constantly iterating. It's my favorite.
Yeah, and sometimes we forget, we stall when there's just so many opportunities in front of us. And especially with going into Figma immediately, right? Like FigJam, and why it's really useful for brainstorming is because we can't change the font. We can't change the font size. We can't be so hyper articulate with like pixel perfect things. And sometimes as designers, I'm like, the post-it doesn't have to be pixel perfect. like you don't have to, make it messy. And sometimes we forget messiness is really essential because we're trying to solve something that's higher order, right? Like we're trying to just figure out what ideas we have, right? And sometimes, especially as designers, what I've learned with myself is, maybe you might have something to add, totally, Rachel, is I have to hold myself back somehow, or like restrict myself from doing some things that are so detail oriented. And sometimes pen and paper is actually a way that I restrict myself from going super deep in an area, because I have a tendency to do that. Yeah.
I 100% resonate with that. And that's why I love going to pen to papers. It helps me not do that. I mean, even in FigJam, Miro, and those more ideation workshop tools, I'll still find myself aligning Post-its so that they're perfectly in the straight row. And even if I know I can't change the font, I'll still try to make it look designy. So I think, just going pen to paper helps me just kind of get to the point and brainstorm.
I'm actually like torn between the two. And I think it's just because of like the past years, like working with a lot of clients, that it's like I have to workshop a solution on the call. So it's like an open Figma, and I have to like show them what's in my head to show them why it would work. And I'll be using like, Frankenstein version of like design systems just to show them like what it is. Because sometimes it's like when I'm sketching, it's like, then I get so like, or like focused on like, oh, that's not a straight line, and I think that's just me like being, picky about it, because it's like, if I would prefer to sketch it, but like it does go faster as far as like when I'm on calls trying to like brainstorm an idea.
I feel you with the not straight line. Whenever I was like sketching boxes for like components in person, I was like, that looks more like a whale. Not a, yeah. I feel that. And then one thing that came up in our conversation, and we didn't articulate it per se with you, Rachel, and Tolu, that you talked about, that was really interesting to highlight, was especially as we work on projects, right? Thinking about all the myriad of like ways of working, and also the different methodologies that we have. There's just so many ways in to get to the solution, right? And also so many solutions that could be totally possible, And at the end of the day, I like to just remind myself, like, there isn't a perfect thing that's going to solve this particular situation, right? And what we're all doing really is just helping to move us forward towards a certain direction. Times also change, tools also change, and really a big part of UX and the industry. And also you see like with the changing titles, right? It's like UX one day, it's like product designer another. Like who knows what's it's going to be like 2 years from now, right? And I think for all of us, we sometimes, especially with the lens of like perfectionism, forget that we have so much flexibility in creating it, and sometimes forget to have fun, right? To have fun, to let loose, and just explore as a part of that creation process. Yeah.
Definitely agree with that, for sure. It is very hard to let go of something, especially when you're like, man, this is the best shit I've ever made in my life. And it's just like, they're probably going to hate it, but whatever, And it's like, you just have to get comfortable with like iterating. Like I feel like that's the fun part of like, ooh, what can I come up with next? How could I, like they said, there's this constraint on it. Now I need to cut back on all these features. Like, what can I do next for this? And just let that be the fun part, instead of it just being like, oh, like I have this one design that looks good.
Yeah, and going back just to the different, I can't remember if you mentioned it, Stephen, just the different processes, for example. And I think something too, and going back to flexibility, is also being flexible in like not always going down this checklist of UX activities, for example, that you have to do with every project. Like sometimes you can leverage, maybe there's research that's been done before or something like that that you could use so that you don't have to feel, I guess, married to going through all these specific steps for a process. So just again, having that flexibility and also questioning, like, do we need to do this, or am I just used to doing this just because that's what I've been taught? That's what maybe we included in the SOW, but maybe it doesn't really need to be done, for example. So again, challenging that, being flexible and sort of letting go of the perfect checklist type of things that I've found myself caught in as well.
Yeah. I mean, an important part to underscore with that is no matter the methodology we use, it's never going to guarantee perfection or a certain result, right, towards the end. Just because we run, user testing with 8 people is not going to guarantee us a perfect answer from all these people, right? Or for 2 rounds of revision doesn't guarantee we're going to get to the end. And sometimes definitely I saw that in myself, where I'm like, I've learned all these methodologies, so I'm so excited to implement it. And in that excitement, I totally forgot to have flexibility for myself or the teams working on it, that it was just more about the doing of the deliverables versus taking a step back and asking, what are we really trying to do here? And it goes back to, right, you can paint a house so many different ways. You use a paintbrush, you can use, a smaller paintbrush. I don't know if you would, but you can also use a gigantic, air spray, right? And it still gets the job done in different myriad of ways. And how I like to think is different tools for different people, different teams, and different needs. Yeah. Is there anything that you like to add to this, Tolu?
I would say too, as you're iterating on your design, like you can get feedback at any stage, even when it's just like an idea that you have. I know sometimes it can feel like you have to have something to show in order to get that feedback, but that's what it comes out to, back to articulating, being able to articulate what it is that you're trying to do. Because there may be some instances where, I mean, it's always better to have some type of like wireframe too, just to have that visually, but being able to truly be able to explain like what it is that you're trying to get across, I think is pretty important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And now this takes us into the last part of our conversation. I think this is where we just connect heart to heart, right? Which is just being somebody in the industry that doesn't look like the typical person that's in the industry, right? That's ruled and dominated by white bodies, white male bodies, cisgender, straight white male bodies. And question for you both is, what are some of the challenges you faced, especially in working in an industry surrounded by so many folks who may not look like you, especially within the realm of UX?
Even since when I was a graphic designer, I've always felt like I have to be like an overachiever, because it's like I'm usually the only Black person that works at the company, sometimes the only woman. So I've always had that kind of like stigma of like, oh, like you're representing the whole Black race. Well, that's not true, And it's taken me, like, to be completely honest, the past like couple years is when I had truly started to let it sink in. Like, I don't have to be the one that does this. Like, there's a person, that's their job, And even for stuff, if it's not someone's job, you don't necessarily have to do every task. Just do the job that you're there to do, and know that it's going to be great regardless. But it's something that I've had to like let seep in and continue, like affirmations every day is something that I do, of like, why me showing up as just like plain myself is good enough. I don't have to go like one up that every time just to prove like, oh, I'm good for a Black designer. But it's like really just like, I'm good for just being a designer. It doesn't have to be because of my ethnicity, right?
Yeah, and building on what Tolu is saying, I think something that I've done before too is just have this feeling that I need to prove myself and just overextending myself, letting go of my boundaries, feeling like I need to do like everything under the sun. And it's just something that's not sustainable and you tire yourself out. So I think just again, to what Tolu was saying, just knowing that like you are enough, your best is your best, and also just trusting where you are in the process and just embracing where you are. I think oftentimes we want to fast forward and get to that end state. And like what I've learned for me personally is that we're just always constantly growing and evolving. And for me, if I really look back at just everything from my design career to maybe even, let's say, a sports game, like I don't remember maybe what I've won. I've actually, like what I really remember is just the process and just really enjoying that and yeah, just embracing that and having fun with it. So not getting so caught up in the end state, but then just, yeah, just enjoying every day, continuing to learn.
And just one more thing I want to add there. Understanding that it's okay to quit. You will find another job. There's community out there. Outreach, share your story too. Like if something bad happened to you at work, share it to someone else, like we're out here to help you. Like that's the whole reason there's communities like this, to know that you're not alone out there. So just know that like you're not ever stuck truly at a company. Like you can find another place, because we want to help you to work at a place that you're being treated equally.
And I do want to build on that too as well. I think it's also not relying on a company, for example, to tell you where you should go or what you should be. Something that I've reminded myself is that I am my own company. I am my own business, right? So if you really think about that, think like know your value, know your worth, know that you are valuable and that you are worth everything that you want, I think is something that's really big. So just investing in your time, your skill set, and not just being married to or attaching yourself to what a company thinks of you.
I think that resonated with a ton of people, with a lot of hearts and a lot of claps. And sometimes the reality, right, is these systems aren't made for us because it wasn't made by us. And we have to hold steadfast the space for us, the container for us. And sometimes it might be scary because it's so scary to just put ourselves out there, right? And prioritize ourselves because the system isn't made to prioritize us. It wants us to be afraid. But also what I remind people too is that we don't have to perform to get somebody to listen to us. We don't have to be perfect to have somebody sit down and agree with us, right? And so with all of that, being listened to, being respected, having space created for us, we actually don't even need to do anything or have achieved anything to get that. And so with that, a big point of at least learning for me is the barometer, right? For someone who doesn't even give you the space, time, or attention to even just present your work in an equitable, fair manner, something to be said about that situation and that person, right? And what kind of container you want to hold for that type of individual as well. And so I think, the hard part is especially when we aren't like the people within the industry or the people who come from a place of privilege. We have to do this learning, right, as a part of the process. And it's also not just juggling, right? User experience, doing the best work, the design work, leading teams, creating amazing products, but also figuring out, one, how are we truly creating space for ourselves that is both sustainable and that is both rewarding for us. Just tell you how sad it makes me to also sometimes see people in our industry leave the industry for good because it was a really bad experience that happened, right? And sometimes hard to convince them. It's like, it's not always like that because that's their experience and it's a lived truth. But just like, communities like this, we're always here helping each other. Find your cheerleaders, right? Find who celebrates you, not just tolerates you within the workplace. And yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful space to be in. And the work itself is beautiful. And we have to sometimes remind us that people, and sometimes the people on our teams or sometimes people on our projects, clients who give us a bad experience isn't representative of the work, of the craft. they're just them, right? The work and the craft and ability for us to connect together to create amazing, beautiful products, whether digital, physical, what have you. That's what keeps me in the industry, at least. And I think is a beautiful, beautiful, yeah, I love it. Yeah. And so along the lines of that, for a question for Tolu, Rachel, what keeps you going? What nourishes you, what heals you, especially, and sometimes the work is like super stressful at times, and just like just like what keeps you going, and what fulfills your heart and mind and soul.
Something that really inspires me that I realized more lately over the past year is like talking to communities like this, seeing that there's other people of color trying to get into the industry, because then it makes me have hope for the future, that there will be more diversity in companies. Because it's like, it's not that there's not enough talent pool out there, like there's plenty of talent pool, but I feel like with the current people coming in, they're being exposed more to like, okay, this is what white people's salaries are. Okay, this is what I should look for when I'm looking for like diversity within companies, or like how they treat employees, compared to some of us that have been in the industry, previously. Of course, we're being educated on this stuff too, but I think it'll change more of like that conversation initially of like before they even enter the company, asking those types of questions to make sure it's a place of work that they would really feel like they would enjoy working at.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's just embracing having fun and almost thinking of it as just playing and practicing, right? Like, I feel like we get, myself included, I can get very serious about something, and just really creating this environment that's just, again, open, fun. I'm definitely finding a team that also embraces that type of culture. And then even something for me as I've moved into more of a managerial role is also like, rather than, I think something that I've experienced too is maybe with other previous managers, that power over. And I think there's a difference of power over versus power with. And I think just leading by example, for example, is a big thing. And I feel like as I look to my team and leaders, I look for people that guide and empower me, rather than, again, that power over type of feeling, being open to not having to be right. Like, we want to grow. And I think part of growing is also admitting that you don't always have to be right, for example. And then just being honest with like how you feel, your communication. I feel like that's definitely something that's helped me continue to be in this space and also just grow as a professional.
Awesome. Let me do some last announcements, and then we will close the space for this evening. But just want to again thank Tolu, Rachel, for sitting in community with us this evening. Just really appreciate you being one, happy International Women's Day, by the way, of just like being really, strong BIPOC women just in this industry, not only creating amazing products, but really shepherding change within your own space. And I think it's just, I don't have to speak on behalf of myself, but your community surrounding you, I'm sure, is thoroughly grateful for you being a part of the space. And so again, just from our organization to you, just like, thank you so much for coming, sharing space with us tonight. Really beautiful conversation. And yeah, just Tolu, Rachel, once again, thank you for your work and also participation in space with us this evening.
Thank you so much. It's been so fun being here with all of you. Really, appreciate everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for having me. Please feel free to reach out to me after this if you have any other questions on Instagram at UINarrative, or you can email me hello@uinarrative.com. I'll drop that in the chat.
And feel free to reach out as well. I can leave my Insta or email as well if you'd like to connect, or LinkedIn.
Yeah, drop those into the chat, Rachel. Yeah, so feel free to leverage us as resources. Aria, Crystal, Kyra, and so much power to you and living your truth in this industry, and keep doing the amazing work that you're doing. It's just, the first job is the hardest to get, and it's all just, the world is your oyster. Awesome. With that, the space is now formally closed with so much compassion, gratitude, Have an awesome rest of your evening and rest of your week, and hope to see you in our space again soon. Bye, everyone.